first just start by setting up the conflict. Who are the two groups and put them at loggerheads?
Okay, so the two parties in the lawsuits are a place called Calvary Chapel, which is a church, and they are in two lawsuits with Santa Clara County, California. For those who don't know, this is Northern California. It's sort of the heart of Silicon Valley.
Okay, so Calvary Chapel is out there, and what happened in Santa Clara County was they were proudly, I think, the first to lock everybody down in March of 2020.
That's right. Santa Clara County was the first among, with a half dozen other counties, the first ones to issue lockdown orders on March 16th. And they really have the distinction of not only being the first, but being probably the most aggressive public health department in the country for enacting and, importantly, for punitively enforcing lockdown orders throughout the pandemic.
So this is San Francisco Bay Area. It's a very, very, very progressive area. And so they're like, we're locking shit down. Like we are locking it up. We're locking up everything, including the churches. Well, unfortunately for them, San Jose's Calvary Chapel, led by its pastor, quoting from your piece, Mike McClure, they had a different vision of how things should go. And 2 months later, May 24th of 2020, the pastor said, I'm reopening this church. And I am going to allow as many people in as want to come in, and I will never close this church again. And they started fining him. Like, there was a great line in your piece. Hold on, I want to get it. You said the church was accruing fines like John Bender racking up detentions in the Breakfast Club for breaching various orders. It was like that. Describe that.
Yeah, so they had, as I mentioned, just an incredibly punitive fine system that they put in place. An interesting side note is the fines were technically for businesses, for commercial entities. And I've been speaking with the attorney for Calvary Chapel, and as most people would probably categorize a church as not as a commercial entity. So that's a whole important piece of the case. But setting that aside, Mike McClure, as you mentioned, the pastor, he opened up the church in May. And once that happened, it really set off this collision course between the two parties. And each day they accrued fines, and the penalties was they had this thing where they basically kept compounding, where you maxed out at $5,000 a day for each penalty. And very, very quickly, the fines ballooned. I think by the middle of October, they were already at $350,000. And ultimately, the fines totaled something like $4 million against this one church. The county rolled it back for some complicated reasons. And now the current lawsuit as it stands, they are seeking $2.87 million in fines.
It became funny money. The church can't pay this. I'm quoting from your piece, by one analysis, as of March of 2021, so a year later, the dispute's ongoing, the county had issued an astonishing $4.9 million in fines to nearly 400 businesses and other entities for pandemic rules infractions. By comparison, 6 other Bay Area counties combined had collected just $82,000. So they were fine happy in Santa Clara, and this was their favorite target of all. They did what we saw in too many cases throughout the pandemic. They decided to try to get citizens to be each other's little policemen and to start reporting on one another if they saw anybody violating the precious COVID rules. And some people did indeed report on Calvary Church.
That's right. The county encouraged citizens to basically tattle on each other for if they saw entities or individuals breaking various public health rules. And someone filed a complaint against Calvary Chapel. So the county had set up a what they call like an enforcement unit with some sort of SWAT team type unit within the public health department. They had something, I believe it was at least 9 or 10, possibly more, people whose job was to function as enforcement officers. So they sent the enforcement officers over to Calvary Chapel, and they observed people gathering, not wearing masks, and they began issuing fines. And that sort of started it on the course that they went down.
It's amazing because as I understand, like Palo Alto is included in Santa Clara County. I mean, like these are like the richest people on earth. They have no crime. That's why they have 10 enforcement officers to go over there and police the churchgoers at Calvary Chapel. So it started with them just looking at, too many people are going in. Oh, and they were watching the live stream mass, and they're like, they're not wearing masks, and started escalating though. We've heard reports about weirdnesses like that. Mm-hmm. This went to a very dark, dystopic level. Tell us what else they did to spy on these churchgoers.
Right. So what just blew my mind about this case and what drew me to it initially was that this is not just about a county finding out about a complaint and seeing some people not wearing masks or too many people gathering indoors. The county launched essentially a multi-tiered surveillance campaign against churchgoers at this particular church. One of the ways that they did this in this sort of like three-prong approach was after they initial violation to the church then barred them from entering. So they had to find another way to find out, to keep observing them. So they got an agreement from the church next door to them at the property next door, and they basically set up camp there and they conducted stakeouts. They were peering through a chain link fence, writing their reports. You almost imagine them using like a telephoto lens. And the reports are extraordinary, and I quote from them pretty extensively, these sort of minutia, and it almost sounds like it's out of like a cop comedy where you have these people there and they're writing about, we observed 8 individuals, 2 of the greeters weren't wearing face coverings, and we observed a child hugging someone else, or something. Like, it's just report after report of this stuff. It is remarkable. But then something interesting happens. My earpiece is coming out. Then something interesting happened. One of the judges issued a temporary restraining order, and that gave the enforcement officers
against the church. Against the church,
right.
Staying
correct.
open.
Right. So that empowered the enforcement officers to enter the church, whereas before that they were banned. So you had all of this sort of stakeout surveillance that they were doing, but then they went in the church. And this is where things, for me, as I was covering the story and I'm reading through just these hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents, it went from being kind of a sad but still sort of like amusing novelty, reading these crazy reports that they wrote up, it became kind of creepy. And you had these enforcement officers going into the church and they are observing a lot of these really intimate private events, baptisms. There was a small prayer group that they were going in. There was a special thing called Manna for Moms, where you have moms with young children, these really intimate gatherings of people. And you have officers from the government there monitoring them and, presumably with a clipboard, writing down in great detail. There were 16 women in the hallway. 3 of them were unmasked. 1 person was singing, and it's just,
because singing was banned. Singing was also banned. I mean, that was a real thing, just not for nothing. But even at my daughter's school in New York before we fled, singing was banned, even outside at recess. And the girls at one point, having absolutely nothing to do, and they weren't allowed to have fun of any kind, decided to put on the play Hamilton just for themselves. One little creative girl knew all the lyrics and taught the others. And the music teacher was out on the playground every other day telling them to shut up, stop singing. So they had to whisper through their masks the lyrics of Hamilton. This is what, so yes, I believe that they cracked down on singing inside the church. And you're right, it's all amusing to think of them looking through their little, binoculars, like, if they saw my church, they'd be like, there's a 9-year-old boy washing his hands in the holy water, right? There's people sleeping, whatever. But this went next level to where intimate gatherings, where people truly bare their souls. I mean, you write it in a very heart-wrenching way about, let's not forget the stories of suicidality, of depression, of extreme anxiety and loneliness during the pandemic. And where did some people choose to seek solace? At this church.
That's right. And one of the really important parts of the story, as I mentioned, what drew me to it was, hearing about the surveillance component. And that's when I started diving in. But while I was researching it, I found something really strange. And I started looking up the various public health orders that were issued at different times. And over, the church, or churches in general, houses of worship, had far more restrictions on them than other entities. So you have people completely barred from getting together inside of a church. But yet malls and retail outlets could operate at 50% capacity. And then ultimately, 7 months after the initial ban on gathering in a church, they finally released it, and they allowed 100 people or 25%, whichever was fewer, to go in churches. But at that point, then they said, oh, by the way, malls, retail stores, no limits at all. So you have just this wildly incongruent policies that if they were truly concerned about viral transmission, that is it appropriate for malls to be open, for people to go to a liquor store, to casinos? But yet, and as you mentioned, Megyn, and this ties into, ultimately, these were not people who were demanding that the barber shops opened on March 17th, and trying to cause a ruckus. These were people, I interviewed a number of people, and I gave some examples in the article. These are people who are really suffering, some of them, people who rely on the church for their support system. And it's funny, coming to this, I'm not a churchgoer, but I instantly and very deeply empathized with what these people were going through.
Question: what's the secret to great skincare? Here's Mary and her husband from Faith, North Carolina, with the answer. She writes, quote, "My husband and I both noticed that our skin is softer and smoother after using Genucel products faithfully. Our skin looks brighter, our wrinkles look softer and less noticeable, and the bags under my eyes are less visible. So happy. Best of all, they're easy to use and apply even for my husband," end quote. Genucel's most popular package, that's all their best stuff, has everything for all of your skincare needs. Wrinkles, dark spots, skin redness, sagging jawline, dark circles, even annoying bags and puffiness under your eyes. And with its immediate effects product, you will see results in 12 hours or less, guaranteed, or you'll get your money back. Stop waiting. Try Genucel's most popular package for 70% off at Genucel.com. And for a limited time, their new probiotic extract moisturizer is included for visibly clearer and younger looking skin, free. Go to Genucel.com/MK60, Genucel.com/MK60, and for a limited time, any subscription order includes a free beauty box and free concierge shipping. GENUCEL.com/MK60. That's Genucel.com/MK60. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.